Welcome to this drivers masterclass. Today I'm going to show you how to create a simple switch with a driver in Blender. So I have a new scene here. I'm just going to click on this camera, hold shift and click on this light. I'm going to go to object, delete. I'm going to take this cube and I'm just going to go to my translate tool and just move it over. I'm going to add a couple things here. I'm going to add a mesh and I'm going to add a cylinder. And I'm just going to move it over as well. And I'm going to add something else. I'm also going to add an armature and a single bone. So first thing I'm going to add is a constraint. Constraints are another way to connect things in Blender when you want to have a relationship between them. It's very similar to a driver. There's just certain benefits to using them sometimes. They can be a little bit quicker to calculate if you have a lot of them. I use them a lot if I'm using IK and FK. So with this cylinder selected, I'm going to come down to the Constraint tab here. I'm going to click on Add Object Constraint, and I'm going to add a copy rotation. I'm just going to expand this a little bit. So now I have this copy rotation here, and the target is going to be the cube. So under Target, I'm going to click Cube. And I'm just going to leave everything at its default. And now when I come to the cube and I go to my Rotate tool, I can rotate that along with the cube. So what I want to do though is put this constraint on a switch. Maybe I only want the cylinder to follow the cube at certain times. Now to do this, I'm actually going to key the influence. This influence here is saying how much of the constraint is going to move the cylinder. So if it's at 0 and I rotate the cube, the cylinder won't rotate at all. But if I put the influence back up to 1, the cylinder now matches the cube rotation with that copy rotation. With the cylinder selected, under Influence, I'm going to right click and I'm going to add a driver. It's going to bring up this panel again. I don't want to use this just yet, so I'm just going to move my mouse outside of it and it'll disappear. Okay, so let's edit this driver now. I'm going to expand the timeline and I'm going to flip it to drivers. So this is the drivers panel here. I'm going to hit N on my keyboard to expand this right-hand menu. And then on the left over here, I'm going to click on this Influence Copy Rotation. Now back on the right, you'll notice that it's actually added this driver panel. I'll click on Drivers. Under Expression, I'm just going to type var. Now you'll notice that it went to 0 right there because right now my var value is 0. So it's put 0 into that influence. So I want to use a scripted single property here instead of a transform channel. So I'll click on Single Property. And the prop I want to use is my armature. Now we haven't built the property yet, so let's do that now. I'll select on the armature, and I'm going to go to pose mode. I'm going to select on the bone, and I'm going to come down to the bone properties tab here. I'm just going to collapse this transform, and under custom properties, I'm going to add a property. Now that I have this property made, I'm just going to click on edit, and property name, I'm just going to change to switch. For property value, I'm going to put this at 1. And for default value, I'm going to put it at 1 as well. The reason I do this is I want it to be 1, not 1.0, and I'll show you why right now. I'm going to click OK. Now the switch just says 1, and if I left click and drag, I can go from 0 to 1. It is a switch. If I go back to edit and put it at 1.0, and the driver value at 1.0, and then I click OK, it's now a dial. And I don't want a dial for this example, I want a switch. So I'm going to click Edit, and I'll put it back to 1. Then I'm going to right click on the 1, and I'm going to go to Copy Data Path. Now nothing's changed, but I'm going to click on the cylinder. And under that driver, under Path, I'm going to do Command V or Control V on a Windows machine, and that's going to paste in the switch. So right now that value is at 1, meaning that that constraint influence is at 1. So I can rotate the cube, and the cylinder will follow along. Now if I come back to my armature, if I come to that bone tab, I now have a switch to turn off that constraint. So I use this when I want to make an IK-FK switch between a leg and an arm rig, or if I want to do a spine follow switch, this is how I'll make switches using drivers. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about how to add simple Python to your drivers. Bye-bye.